My name is Tom Geraci. I am a outreach staff and former marketing intern at Perkins School for the Blind. I'm also a legally blind student myself, and I've attended Perkins's program since birth, including outreach programs, infant toddler, and transition programs. So with that, I carry a wealth of experience about both my own blindness as well as those of other blind and vision impaired people that I've surrounded myself with. And today I'm going to talk about what growing up blind may look like for whoever you're working with, whether it's your child or your student. Blindness can look different for everyone. And as they say, when you've met one blind person, you've met one blind person. But at the same time, a lot of the supports that we end up needing throughout our lives do look kind of similar. We all need some sort of tech, compensatory skills, ways of getting around. But the ways that we do all those things is different depending on what our personal needs are. So today I'm going to talk about some of the ways that could manifest from birth to transition age. First, some personal background. I'm currently a student in Merrimack College's Communication Master's program, which I'm graduating from this May. I interned in Perkins's marketing department for 3 summers and currently work as a resident assistant in outreaches programs as well as doing some development and marketing work for Perkins on the side. I was born 4 months early with retinopathy of prematurity, so that's why I am legally blind. Before I continue, though, I'd like to give some quick little image descriptions. So on the bottom part of the screen, you'll see 4 photos of me from different stages of my life. The one on the left was from when I was a baby. The second one is from when I was in kindergarten. The third one was from 2016, so I was in 8th grade. And then the last one is from just last fall when I spoke at the annual meeting here in Perkins's Grossbeck Center. So just kind of showing how I've evolved over time, but also want to set a good example for everyone because image descriptions are a key part of how a lot of blind and vision impaired people process information online. I'm not describing what's on my shirt or anything like that, but I am describing the context of what half the screen is showing, which I think is more important than showing every little detail. Now I want to talk about the importance of supports. Blind kids become blind teens who become blind adults, and at every stage in their development, at every stage of life, really, supports can look different based upon a lot of different factors, whether it's additional disabilities, environment that they're in, what the support system looks like in their school. There's tons of different ways supports can look different at different ages with different blind people, but also even in different environments. Regardless of where the supports are, how much support your kid needs or your student needs, the big thing that supports have is that they are an equalizer. They are not a leg up. They help blind kids stay more at pace with their sighted peers, which is crucial. They'll manifest themselves in a lot of different ways, as I mentioned, and they'll allow blind kids to transition into adults with meaningful, purposeful lives where they can have autonomy and agency in the things that they do to the best of their ability, have decision making and autonomy and purpose and all the things that we all want in life as an adult. So that's why supports exist as a child, especially because they help set the foundation for everything that's to come. Some examples of supports that are popular with a lot of blind people include accommodations both in school and in the workplace. This nowadays often is more digital, like getting stuff digitally in a accessible format. But in a lot of schools, you're still dealing with print a lot or things that are on a whiteboard. So in large print, sitting up front, having CCTV or a magnifier near you potentially could be really crucial. Programs attended, so this could be a program at Perkins, like Perkins's infant toddler programs or outreach programs that are very popular with blind and low vision students across New England because these are supports that students get outside of a school day that help enrich their lives and give them the skills that they need to succeed. But they could also be school supports like learning Braille or cane skills or tech skills or anything else that your child might need or your students might need to get during the school day rather than outside of it. This could be in the form of being pulled out of a class or potentially someone pushing into a class and teaching the skills while they're still being in their mainstream class with their sighted peers, and also having social opportunities with other blind peers. This isn't always thought of as a support because it's not like something that might necessarily be on an IEP or a 504, but it is still very important, especially as someone who grew up and still doesn't really have a ton of blind people at the place that they go to school. Having these opportunities outside of the school day are huge for helping blind people blind kids find a sense of purpose and a sense of belonging and just find people who get them in their corner. For me, a lot of how I got those opportunities was through Perkins's outreach programs or through programs at the Carroll Center for the Blind down the street or in this professional development group that I'm in right now that's helping blind students transition into the workforce with confidence. All of those programs that I just mentioned are exclusive to blind kids, which means that every program that you're in, you're only going to be interacting with other blind people your own age, which is not something that we normally do when we're not in those programs, which is why they are really, really important and why I would recommend getting involved with them as soon as you possibly can. So now we're going to go through the four kind of or 4 or 5 different stages, I would say, of development from birth to age 22. The first is the early years, birth to age 5. A lot of the supports that blind and vision impaired kids receive during this time are very tactile and sensory heavy, and for good reason, because when you're a young kid, you process a lot, sighted, blind, whatever, you process a lot of information through your senses. That's how you interact with the world, through smelling things, seeing things, hearing things, touching things, especially tactile. Even if you're sighted, having the opportunity to touch things is how you're getting access to the world. And a lot of little kids, really find a lot of gratification through that. So I think that that is kind of my biggest piece of advice is really make tactile things a focus. A parent is a child's first teacher. And oftentimes the way that these kids are going to be processing, you know, the information that's eventually going to be transferred into their academics is through tactile stuff. So making sure that there's opportunities all around your house even for interfacing with tactile environments is huge. So also what's huge for parents and educators is learning about all the resources that are available to them, both locally in their town, maybe at the state level, maybe at an organization like Perkins or the Carroll Center or any other organization that you may have heard of. You might feel alone, maybe, but there's a ton of different organizations that are specifically out there to help blind kids as they become older and need different supports, even just looking where you least expect them. There might even be someone in like a town Facebook group who can help you learn about different resources that are available to you. Because I know my parents, when I was younger, they didn't really know what to do when they were learning, like, yeah, you have a legally blind kid. But trust me, there are tons and tons of resources available for you to really help navigate having a kid who has different needs. It's important to know that there's people in your corner. Other ways that this might kind of manifest include additional early intervention, maybe for additional disabilities your child might have, joining parent groups. That's huge because, like I said, you're navigating this thing. You don't need to be alone. You can talk to other parents of blind kids and learn how to navigate this with them. And also like specialized books and toys, like toys or books that are specifically designed for blind and low vision people. I didn't have many of these when I was a kid, but they do exist and they are helpful. So I would recommend looking into them if you think they would be beneficial. Next, I'm going to talk about elementary school age kids. For me, when I was in elementary school, I attended public school. I learned basic cane techniques. I learned Braille. I learned different routes around my school and other familiar settings. I did mostly print work with a video magnifier or CCTV, occasionally helping, but most of the time at this point, I was one of those kids that was leaning in 6 inches to their work, wasn't using a slant board or any kind of adaptation. I was just leaning in. And yes, my parents were concerned about that. I also started attending my first outreach programs with Perkins at the time. Wasn't attending them very regularly, maybe once a year, but it was still setting the foundation for what was to come because I started attending way more outreach programs as my education progressed. I lived only 15 minutes away from Perkins, and my parents were not afraid at all somehow of sending me on my own to my first program when I was 7 years old because they knew how resourceful Perkins was. Because, like I said, I attended the infant toddler program as a kid, and Perkins' reputation speaks for itself. Other areas that you might want support in during these elementary years, you may want to look into attending disability specific summer camps. That is a bit of a plug because I did work for one of them for 2 summers, but disability focused or blind focused summer programs are huge for a lot of the same reasons that something like a Perkins outreach program is, because they provide opportunities that do not exist in the quote unquote normal world where your blind child can interact with other blind kids and just be themselves and not have to worry about anyone else. But also, you know, your kid deserves to have a summer camp that understands them where they can actually have fun and not have to worry about, people maybe misunderstanding them or not getting your child's needs. So I think that looking into camps that are blindness specific or disability specific is crucial. You might be scared to send them off if they're really young, but I guarantee you it's going to pay dividends in the long run for your kid and their confidence and their social life and just everything. You could also use a Braille note taker or a screen reader. There's a lot of different ways that your child can learn technology at a young age and get ahead of their sighted peers because honestly, like my biggest advice is to always make sure that like whatever you think the typical milestones are for a sighted kid, keep those in mind. But if you can, I would definitely push to, maybe be one step ahead of those and to learn maybe keystrokes or something more advanced, maybe from a younger age if your child's capable of that. Because one, it'll build confidence, but two, more importantly, it'll help level the playing field because they might not have the visual element to succeed in, some of their classes, but they'll have better tech school skills than some of their peers, which is a huge leg up, I would say. In middle school, I transitioned to a smaller private school where I was the only blind person there. This was definitely an awakening moment for me. I had to really learn how to self advocate and I didn't really have a TVI going to all my classes or anything like that. So I had to learn how to be my own boss essentially when I was at the ripe age of 13, when a lot of other blind kids don't really have to do that until they're 18 or 22 even. So that was definitely not a typical part of the blindness journey, I would say, but I credit that partially to my smooth transition into high school and college because I already knew how to navigate something like a disability service office that a college might have because I had to advocate for my own needs a lot more than a lot of other blind kids my age, and that was huge. I started attending a lot of outreach programs during this time as well because being the only blind person in my school, I didn't feel like people understood me, so I turned to the place that I knew people would always get me at, which was Perkins. During these programs, I learned a lot of really key skills. And like I said, these are skills that your sighted middle schooler might not necessarily be working on yet, but I was because I knew that I wanted to have a leg up. So things like laundry, cooking, navigating public transportation, all these skills that you might not necessarily be doing until high school if you're sighted, I was picking up earlier because I wanted to give myself a bit of an advantage. You could join a mentorship program as well. There's a lot of really strong disability mentorship programs out there that are looking for kids, maybe even on the younger side, maybe as young as like 8 or 9, where they get partnered up with a sighted or a blind mentor and they kind of help be a person for them and a person they can lean on, which especially in those early adolescent years where oftentimes people are so concerned about fitting in and people understanding them and having a sense of belonging. That can be really key when you might have a kid who doesn't quite feel that. In the transition high school years, for me, a big factor for that was self direction with academic goals. I knew really, really well that I wanted to go to college. So I took steps beginning in my sophomore year of high school when I was like 15 or 16 to make that my priority. I started attending college fairs, I did college tours. I really wanted to get direction and agency in my own life from an early time in high school. So I did that. I attended transition programs in the summer. This includes Perkins's 3-week program, as well as the Carroll Center's Youth in Transition and Computing for College programs. These were really crucial for me because they were the first times that I had been away from home with other blind people for weeks on end. Previously, I had only really attended weekend programs for outreach. Whereas here, I was just there for weeks and I was enjoying every second of it. I had never met so many blind people and been surrounded by blind people for weeks on end in my life. And moreover, it was the first time that I had blind mentors who were older than me, who were working at these organizations like Perkins and Carroll and telling me how their life has been and what they did in college and how they transitioned into adulthood, things like that. Like, these are not things that we're necessarily going to learn in a weekend program or certainly not in a mainstream high school, but because I was going into these environments very intentionally, trying to connect with other blind people, both my age and older, I was getting a ton out of them. I worked my first summer jobs during this period. Shout out Potterham Golf Course. I also did a typical high school to college pathway, got my high school diploma, and then went to college the next fall. But that's not going to be the journey for everyone, right? Because especially during these transition years, oftentimes a lot of blind kids will choose to go on very different paths for a variety of reasons. Maybe they aren't academically ready for college. Maybe they think they need more skill development with blindness skills. Maybe they just want to take a gap year and travel or work or whatever. There's a lot of different ways that blind teenagers can realize their potential through having self-direction in their transition goals. And I think regardless of what path they want to take, they should have agency in their decisions. Vocational training is also huge. Perkins has a lot of opportunities for that. We have a cafe on campus, we have a horticultural center, a Braille and Talking Book library, a tech area. Like we have a lot of different areas where students of Perkins in the secondary program get vocational training. And that's huge for them because they're getting this training during the school day in a blind setting, which is helping prepare them for when they do eventually, or if they transition into competitive employment, that they already kind of know what is expected of them before they even start, which is not necessarily the case when a sighted kid starts their first summer job. So, once again, another way that blindness organizations are helping level the playing field for the students that they deal with, which is huge. And then we go to the college age years, which I guess I could call these transition years too, because for a lot of blind students, they might be staying in transition programs until they're 22. And there's a lot of ways that this period of life could differ for people, but whether you're in college or somewhere else, I think a big part of it is planning for whatever's next. Usually that involves some sort of work. For me, I try to get ahead in what I was doing by doing internships every single summer. I joined a professional development group in 2024 that was specific to blind people called the TAD Foundation. And when I joined this, I was able to meet other blind people who were also in my same boat, leaving school soon, looking forward to what's next, and wanting to get ahead in their job search process. And the way that this program works is you get a mentor who's blind and a mentor who's sighted. They both work in your field. So, like, I'm in marketing. I got two mentors that are both in marketing, and we were able to kind of talk things out, talk about my vocational goals, job interviews, any sort of career related questions I had, I could give to them in the hour a week that we met. But also, a big part of this experience, beyond just having those mentorship opportunities, meeting other blind students from across the country, is having the opportunities to attend networking events where you can practice how to give an elevator pitch or how to sell yourself to a loud room of people where it's tightly packed and there's canes and guide dogs everywhere. It's frankly pretty overstimulating, but it's supposed to be like that. And that helps me deal with things like sighted networking events. But anyway, I work competitively at Perkins. I'm working in the outreach programs and the marketing department. And in both of those processes, I had to go through kind of your typical hiring process through HR. I'm living in an off campus apartment, cooking my own meals, walking to class across a busy street, doing all those things that younger me probably would have never dreamed of. But places like Perkins really helped give me the confidence to do that. And I'm taking complex trips in public transit. My commute from college to home is over 2 hours and involves three different legs. Like I go from a train to a bus. It's really great, and I'm sure my parents are glad they don't have to drive me back and forth all the time to my school. What it might look like for someone who is maybe on a more transition focused track where they're graduating at 22 is planning for that age 22 cliff, planning on how are we going to transition into the adult services world and the adult world in general? Because once you're 22, you age out of education. But what's next, right? Like you could go into work, you could go into a day facility. But there's a lot of different paths that you could go down that could be competitive employment, could be maybe a vocational training situation, could be something completely different. There's so many opportunities that are out there for someone looking for more of a non-traditional path. There's also specialized college or trade programs at some colleges. A lot of them focus on students that have intellectual or developmental disabilities. Looking into those, I think, would be good if your student does want to go down the college path. but still needs some help getting there. And also, a lot of transition programs do really, really good with life skill development, vocational training, all the things that people wish they had learned in high school. These transition programs are bringing right to the disabled students when they need it the most, which I think is really great. But one thing I want to emphasize is that there's no one path to success because, yes, some could look at my path and think that that's better, but competition really is the thief of the whole journey. No one journey of a blind person is going to look identical to the next blind person you interact with. Once you realize that you're not on anyone else's journey but your own, you can really start to appreciate the skills that your child or your student does have and the journey that they're on to succeeding in life. So I think that that's really important, and that's something I want to leave you with because success does look different. And I think the most important thing for you guys to realize is regardless of how different or similar success may look for your child, being able to support them in whatever ways are available to them, whatever ways you can, I think will is the most important because that's what's going to set them up for success later in life in their adulthood. But I'd like to thank you guys for coming to my presentation and also deciding to come to Early Connections Day in general because I attended this event in person last year and it was a really impactful event. So definitely stay around for the other presentations, go around the app. There's a lot of different presentations to watch and all of them are very helpful. So yeah, thank you for watching.